this has been a lot of fun for me. Anne had said, oh, thank you for this hard work, but it's really fun work, I would say. And I guess I wanted to start by asking you all, what do you think was going on in the world in 1750? What do you think was going on in the world in 1750? Anybody?
Wasn't that about the time Handel was writing his Messiah?
Wow! What? Wayne Massey, that's exactly right.
As a planet
Handel's
question,
Messiah
too.
was finished around 1741. That's exactly right. That's amazing. That's what a PhD in English will do. There you go. Anyway, in addition to that, America was, of course, not America then. It was the American colonies. There were the colonies that were all along the seaboard, and where we are now was largely Cherokee territory. In other words, you know, this area was being founded, so to speak. There were settlers that were beginning to come in, but they were very few and far between. Okay, but there was a guy that came down. Now I know you're going to think I'm making this up. Okay, but truly his name was Shubal Starnes. I'm not kidding you. Shubal Starnes, yes. Shubal Starnes was basically the father of Baptist work in the South. Okay, and at that time, the East Coast was largely Anglican. Okay, and so that's what we know today is Episcopalian. Okay, or as my granddaddy Williams used to say, Whiskey-palian. You know, so I hope nobody's Episcopalian. Anyway, okay. So at any rate, in 1750, okay, Shubal Starnes came down from Connecticut, and that's where a lot of Baptist work was taking place. That and Philadelphia. The northern part of the colonies was where Baptist work had really started, and they had come out of England because there was a lot of persecution for anything not named the Anglican Church. And so pretty much the entire eastern seaboard was Anglican. And even in Virginia, Greg Embry, I mean, that was one of the hot spots for persecution of Baptists. And that, to me, I found remarkable. But at any rate, Shubal Starnes came down to this place called Sandy Creek. And where is Sandy Creek in North Carolina? Pretty much right in the middle of it. It's a place called Liberty today in North Carolina, and he established the Sandy Creek Baptist Church and subsequently the Sandy Creek Baptist Association, because that was the deal. Was in those days, the churches did cooperate, they did collaborate, and so this association was begun in central North Carolina, and as people began to move to the west, okay, now there was a line, and you may have heard of this, okay, the Proclamation Line of 1763. Okay, have any of you ever heard of that? The Proclamation Line of 1763. Okay, so the king at that time was King George III, KG3. Okay, and he was, anyway, antagonistic, we'll say, towards the colonies, and, you know, they had people throwing tea in the harbor and stuff like this. So he came out, and because of the Indians, okay, not just the Cherokee, it was like all up and down the seaboard, declared that the Continental Divide would form this proclamation line, and anybody who tried to settle west of that, like here, was breaking the law. So you had to be a renegade to go west of the proclamation line of 1763. Now, you know, they couldn't fly drones over and see if you were trying to set up something, so a lot of people did it anyway. And when they did it, they came in groups, okay? And some of them, you know, came in a group that was like a church group, okay? So the settlement began taking place on the western part of North Carolina. Now, by western part of North Carolina, maybe Marshall, maybe Asheville, you know, maybe Hendersonville, but really, this was the western part of North Carolina. Okay, this was a part of the state of North Carolina at that time, or the colony, I should say, of North Carolina. So people came across, well, guess which association expanded west? The Sandy Creek Association. That's right, okay? And so the Sandy Creek Association came out this way, and the first church in Tennessee, the First Baptist Church, was Buffalo Ridge Baptist Church in what is now Washington County. Okay? And remember this name, Tidence Lane. Tidence Lane, T-I-D-E-N-C-E, Lane. He was the first pastor. And this was a mission outreach from Sandy Springs Association. So that was the First Baptist Church in Tennessee. And that was set up in 1786, and around that time period, 1786. Now, at that time, there were other Baptist churches that were spreading out in Tennessee. Tennessee was quickly populated in and around the late 18th century. Anybody know what else was going on in the late 18th century? Like a war that... Who? I'm sorry, Libby, what'd you say? Huh?
Civil War.
Come back a little bit. Anybody heard of the Revolutionary War? Okay, Kings Mountain, okay, Yorktown, Saratoga, Bunker Hill. All of that was happening.
The
state of Franklin?
The state of Franklin, yeah, okay. Now, the Revolutionary War was going on at that time. It did not affect greatly this part of the country, but it did to some extent, and that's where you had 1780, the Battle of Kings Mountain, okay? Now, so there were people who were populating this area. There were people who were populating southwest Virginia. There were people that were populating central and western North Carolina. Those were some of my ancestors, in fact, okay? Now, at that time, this Buffalo Ridge church came into being, and true to Baptist form, not long after, several other churches began appearing in the area. And so they started, by proximity, a new association, and it was called the Holston Association. Now, another thing that you have to keep in mind about that time period is waterways and other physical features determine the names of a lot of places. Now, every now and then you get a name, you know, like Tuckertown, which you now know is Newmarket, okay? And, you know, other places that were named after someone, but in a lot of cases, places were named after the river or the creek or the hill or the grove of trees. Another example, Bristol, Virginia was originally known as Sapling Grove, okay? And so down into Tennessee, you had all this work going on, the spread of Baptist churches. One of the churches was what's called the Lower French Broad Baptist Church. Now that's important. Lower French Broad, today you know it as First Baptist Church of Dandridge, okay? And April was talking about that a couple of weeks ago. We were discussing, and yes, that was called the Lower French Broad Baptist Church. The French Broad Baptist Church is a different church today. But Lower French Broad was First Baptist Dandridge. Now that was the first church in Jefferson County. And so what they did was they set up an association, and it was called the Holston Association, named for the Holston River. And so that was the first Baptist association in Tennessee. Now, when I say 1786, now the Revolutionary War is over. But North Carolina still includes all of this area. And that's why, what Greg said, there was a state of Franklin that they came up with in an attempt to force the hand of the broke federal government at that time to form a state here. It didn't happen until 1796. So when 1796 came along, then Tennessee was a state. Okay, it was a separate state. It went all the way, to the Mississippi River, the 3 grand divisions of Tennessee, et cetera, et cetera. So at that time, you had the 7 churches formed the Holston Baptist Association, and guess who was the moderator of that association? None other than Tidance Lane, okay, the pastor at Buffalo Ridge. And that's one of the pictures. Oh, Libby, when did you get that?
Oh, I don't have it up here for you to see.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's Shubal Starnes. And that's a picture of him in, Sandy Creek, North Carolina. Okay? And that church still exists. There's a picture of that church as well. In its log cabin form, still. Oh, there it is. Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Libby, do you have that picture just of the ridge? It's got like a big, that's it. Okay, so that's Buffalo Ridge.